Freud versus Jung, the great dream debate. Picture this. It's 1906, and two brilliant minds sit across from each other in a Viennese coffee house, locked in conversation for 13 straight hours. Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, has just met Carl Gustav Jung, a young Swiss psychiatrist 30 years his junior. They're discussing dreams, those mysterious nocturnal theaters where our minds play out scenarios both mundane and bizarre. Little do they know that this meeting will spark one of psychology's greatest intellectual battles, a debate that would reshape how we understand the human psyche and continue to influence our lives today. What started as mentorship would become rivalry. What began as shared fascination would evolve into fundamentally opposing views about the very nature of human consciousness. Freud believed dreams were the royal road to the unconscious, secret messages revealing our darkest desires. Jung saw them as something far more profound, gateways to a collective wisdom shared by all humanity. Their split didn't just divide psychology, it created two entirely different ways of understanding who we are when we close our eyes each night. But here's the fascinating part. More than a century later, both men's insights continue to shape not just therapy rooms, but art, literature, spirituality, and even how we interpret our own midnight visions. To understand this great dream debate, we need to step into the world of early 20th century Vienna, where Freud had just published The Interpretation of Dreams, a revolutionary work that dared suggest our nightly visions weren't random neural firings, but meaningful communications from our unconscious mind. Imagine the scandal. In an era where dreams were dismissed as indigestion or divine messages, Freud proposed something radical. That dreams were wish fulfillments, particularly of desires we couldn't accept in our waking lives. Freud's theory was elegantly simple, yet provocatively complex. He argued that our unconscious mind operates like a clever censor, transforming our forbidden wishes into symbolic dream scenarios. A dream about climbing a tower wasn't really about towers. It was about sex. A dream about losing your teeth wasn't about dental anxiety. It was about castration fears. Every dream image was a disguise. Every scenario a code to be cracked. The manifest content, what you actually remember from your dream, was merely a facade hiding the latent content, the real meaning lurking beneath. This wasn't just theoretical speculation for Freud. He meticulously analyzed his own dreams, including the famous Irma's injection dream, where he dreamed of examining a patient's throat. Through careful analysis, he concluded this dream fulfilled his wish to be absolved of responsibility for the patient's continued suffering. It was a masterclass in psychological detective work, revealing how our sleeping minds craft elaborate stories to satisfy our deepest, often unacceptable desires. But Freud's dream theory went deeper than mere wish fulfillment. He proposed that dreams served as guardians of sleep itself. Without this nightly theater where forbidden desires could play out safely in symbolic form, we'd be constantly awakened by psychological conflicts. Dreams, in essence, were the mind's pressure release valve, allowing us to experience what we couldn't permit ourselves in waking life while keeping us blissfully unconscious. Enter Carl Jung, initially Freud's most promising protege. Jung was captivated by Freud's revolutionary approach, but as he delved deeper into his own research and clinical work, fundamental disagreements began to emerge. Where Freud saw sexuality as the primary driving force of human behavior, Jung observed something more complex. Where Freud focused on personal history and repressed childhood memories, Jung noticed patterns that seemed to transcend individual experience. The breaking point came through dreams themselves. Jung began experiencing a series of powerful dreams that didn't fit Freud's framework. In one particularly vivid dream, he found himself in a multi-story house. The upper floors were well-appointed and familiar, but as he descended, each level became more primitive and ancient, until he reached a cave-like basement filled with scattered bones and ancient pottery. When Jung shared this dream with Freud, the older man immediately focused on the bones. insisting they represented death wishes against Jung's family members. But Jung saw something entirely different. To him, the house represented layers of consciousness itself, the upper floors being personal consciousness, the lower levels representing deeper, more ancient aspects of the psyche, shared by all humanity. This dream became foundational to Jung's revolutionary concept of the collective unconscious, a psychological realm containing universal symbols and patterns he would call archetypes. This marked the beginning of their intellectual divergence. Jung's approach to dreams was fundamentally different from Freud's archaeological method of digging into personal history. Jung saw dreams as compensatory, serving to balance our conscious attitudes. If you were overly rational in waking life, your dreams might emphasize emotion and intuition. If you were too focused on material concerns, your dreams might present spiritual imagery. Dreams weren't just about the past. They were about psychological equilibrium and future potential. Jung introduced the concept of archetypal dreams, visions that tap into universal human experiences. The wise old man, the great mother, the shadow self, the anima and animus. These weren't just personal symbols, but collective ones, inherited psychological patterns that emerge in dreams across all cultures and historical periods. When someone dreams of flying, Jung might see this not as a sexual symbol, but as an expression of the transcendence archetype, a universal human longing to rise above earthly limitations. Consider the differences in how they might interpret a common dream scenario. Being chased. Freud would likely explore what forbidden desire or repressed memory the pursuer represents, perhaps tracing it back to childhood conflicts with authority figures. The dream serves to fulfill a wish while keeping the dreamer from recognizing its true sexual or aggressive nature. Jung, however, might see the pursuer as the shadow self, those aspects of personality we've rejected or ignored. The chase represents not repression, but integration, the psyche's attempt to make the dreamer conscious of disowned parts of themselves. The dream isn't hiding something, it's revealing something essential for psychological wholeness. Their therapeutic approaches reflected these fundamental differences. Freudian dream analysis was interpretive. The analyst decodes the dream's hidden meaning for the patient. Jungian dream work was collaborative. Patient and therapist explore the dream's symbolic richness together, understanding that the dreamer is often the best interpreter of their own unconscious communications. But here's where their debate becomes particularly relevant to our modern understanding. Contemporary neuroscience has validated aspects of both approaches while challenging others. We now know that REM sleep, when most vivid dreaming occurs, involves intense brain activity, particularly in areas associated with memory consolidation and emotional processing. This supports both Freud's idea that dreams process psychological material and Jung's view that they serve important psychological functions. Modern research has shown that dreams do indeed help us process emotional experiences and consolidate memories, functions that align remarkably well with Jung's compensatory theory. Studies demonstrate that people deprived of REM sleep show increased emotional reactivity and difficulty processing complex feelings, exactly what Jung would predict if dreams served to balance psychological functioning. Yet Freud's emphasis on the personal unconscious and repressed material has found validation too. Neuroimaging shows that during REM sleep, the prefrontal cortex, our rational, censoring mind, is less active, while emotional and memory centers are highly engaged. This creates conditions where repressed or suppressed material might indeed surface more freely, much as Freud suggested. The debate extends beyond therapy rooms into how we understand creativity, spirituality, and human potential. Freud's approach tends towards psychological reductionism, explaining complex experiences in terms of simpler, often sexual or aggressive drives. Jung's perspective embraces complexity, seeing dreams as communications from a wise unconscious mind that knows things our conscious selves haven't yet discovered. In literature and the arts, Jung's influence has been profound. Writers like Hermann Hesse, Filmmakers like Federico Fellini and mythologists like Joseph Campbell drew heavily on Jungian concepts of archetypal patterns and collective symbolism. The hero's journey that underlies countless stories, from ancient myths to modern movies, reflects Jung's understanding of universal psychological patterns that transcend individual experience. Meanwhile, Freud's insights into the power of repression, the significance of early childhood experiences, and the role of sexuality in human development revolutionized not just psychology, but sociology, anthropology, and cultural criticism. His influence can be seen in everything from advertising techniques that appeal to unconscious desires to literary criticism that uncovers hidden meanings in texts. The practical implications of their debate continue in contemporary psychology. Cognitive behavioral therapy, currently dominant in many clinical settings, ironically incorporates elements of both approaches while rejecting others. CBT acknowledges that automatic thoughts and core beliefs, often unconscious, influence behavior, echoing Freudian insights about hidden psychological processes. Yet its focus on adaptive functioning and psychological balance reflects Jungian emphasis on psychological integration and health. In dream research specifically, the pendulum has swung toward more Jungian perspectives. Contemporary dreamworkers are less likely to insist on universal symbolic meanings and more inclined to explore what dreams might reveal about psychological balance, creative potential, and spiritual development. The International Association for the Study of Dreams, founded in 1983, embraces approaches that would be more recognizable to Jung than to Freud. But perhaps most intriguingly, both men's insights find validation in emerging fields like positive psychology and transpersonal psychology. Freud's emphasis on making the unconscious conscious aligns with mindfulness practices that bring automatic reactions into awareness. Jung's focus on individuation, becoming who we truly are rather than who we think we should be, resonates strongly with contemporary emphasis on authenticity and self-actualization. Consider how their different approaches might apply to a modern phenomenon. Recurring dreams about missing important exams, common among professionals years after completing their education. A Freudian analysis might explore what authority figures or performance anxieties from childhood these dreams represent, perhaps uncovering fears of inadequacy or punishment that originated in early family dynamics. A Jungian approach might examine what aspects of the dreamer's current life feel tested or evaluated, seeing the dream as compensation for perhaps being too confident or complacent in waking life. The dream serves as a psychological alarm clock, reminding the dreamer not to take their competence for granted. Both interpretations offer valuable insights, and modern dream work often incorporates elements of each approach. The key insight from their debate isn't that one was right and the other wrong, but that dreams are rich enough to support multiple levels of meaning and function. Their intellectual battle also illuminates broader questions about human nature. Are we primarily driven by biological instincts and childhood conditioning, as Freud suggested, or by archetypal patterns and spiritual yearnings, as Jung proposed? Are we psychological machines to be analyzed and repaired, or complex beings on journeys toward wholeness and meaning? These questions remain as relevant today as they were a century ago. In our current era of neuroscience and brain imaging, of artificial intelligence and virtual reality, of global connection and cultural fragmentation, both Freud's insights into hidden psychological processes and Jung's vision of collective wisdom continue to offer valuable perspectives on what it means to be human. As we return to that Viennese coffee house where it all began, we can appreciate the magnitude of what Freud and Jung set in motion. Their 13-hour conversation didn't just launch a friendship and later a rivalry. It opened up entirely new ways of understanding the mysterious landscape of human consciousness. Today, more than a century later, their debate continues, not because one was definitively right or wrong, but because both captured essential truths about the complexity of human experience. In our dreams, we still encounter both the personal symbols Freud taught us to recognize and the archetypal patterns Jung revealed. We still find wish fulfillments and psychological compensations, childhood traumas, and collective wisdom. Modern neuroscience hasn't resolved their debate so much as deepened it, showing us that our sleeping minds are even more intricate and purposeful than either man imagined. Perhaps the real winner in this great dream debate isn't Freud or Jung, but our collective understanding of human consciousness itself. Every night, as we surrender to sleep and enter the theater of dreams, we participate in the ongoing conversation between these two giants of psychology. In our personal dream symbols and our universal human longings, in our deepest fears and highest aspirations, the conversation continues. And in that continuation lies not just the legacy of their debate, but the endless mystery of what it means to dream, to think, and to be human in a world that still, thankfully, holds more questions than answers about the remarkable complexity of the human mind.